Hello, folks, and welcome once again to another episode of the Red Delta Project podcast, where we teach you how to maximize results with minimalist fitness, diet, and exercise methods. My name is masterfully, founder of the Red Delta Project, and it is my extreme pleasure and privilege to be talking once again with the man himself, Kavadlo. He's got a brand new book coming out with his brother Danny in the next several weeks, so I invited him here on the podcast to give us some of the deets and to share more about what it's all about. And I'm really excited. So Al, thank you very much for coming on again.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me. I always enjoy our conversations.
Absolutely. So let's dive right into it then. Next Level Strength. This is a book that, well, to be perfectly honest, just had to be written because there's nothing like this that I've found so much in the bodyweight world, because this is a book about using two of the most popular implements in calisthenics training, the rings and the parallettes, in one volume. What inspired you to take on this new project?
Well, Matt, I think I felt exactly the same way that you felt what you just said a moment ago, that this is something that needed to be written. So, I've written a lot of other books about calisthenics, and me and my brother and co-author, Danny Kavadlo, have written a couple books together, and we like to be as thorough as possible. And this was a major thing in the calisthenics kingdom that we hadn't really addressed before until now. And it's something we get asked about a lot, and they're really specific pieces of equipment that I think a lot of people are not really sure how to get started with and how to progress to get.
And that's one of the reasons why I was glad to kind of get my hands on this thing, because there's so much information out there. We live in this age now where we've got YouTube and we've got podcasts and stuff, but it's hard to find condensed, straight to the point information these days, where it's like, just tell me what I need to do, or just give me the bare essentials that I need to get started with this. And that kind of information is so hard to find. And I find that this book is so refreshing about that, because for someone who getting into bodyweight training, I think it's a natural level to go to of, rings or parallettes or something. But where do I go to get started with this? And this book fills in the gap perfectly.
I'm so glad to hear that that's your impression of it, because that's a big thing with me and has always been, trying to get my information out there in the most concise and digestible way possible. Because I've seen some other books and things online that, like you said, they're so long-winded, and you find yourself thinking, just get to the point already. So we went through a lot of revision and a lot of editing with this book to just make it as jam-packed as possible. So I'm really glad that was something that you took away from looking at it.
The impression that I got from reading this book was that it's just so zen. It's really filtered down into the essentials. And it's honestly making me take a second look and a second glance at my own book, because I'm looking at all these words I'm writing, but you do so much with so little in it, where you turn to a page and it's like, there's like 3 paragraphs here, but it's everything I need to do to get this move down. How long was the book originally, and did it filter down to that, or did you start off with something that concise?
Every time that I've done any book or large-scale project like that, the original idea that you have and the original outline that you write, and then the final product that you end up with, are always pretty different, because it goes through a process of, in the beginning, we kind of just write everything down. Danny likes to say, throw up on the page, just say every thought you think. And then we reread it over and over, and this sentence can go. Maybe we can say this in fewer words. Maybe this is a little redundant and we don't need to say it again, or maybe this does need to get said again because we really need to drive that point home. So when Danny and I finished the first draft of this manuscript, we sat down together and read the entire thing out loud. And reading it out loud really is a good way to help you trim the fat. Because as you're reading it, you start to edit in your head, and you start to think, I don't need to say this. Or you hear yourself saying the words, and you're like, this is redundant, this is repetitive. So we cut a lot out, and then we did that again. We met up a week later, and we read the whole thing out loud again, and made more edits. And in some instances, added a whole new paragraph. It's like, wait, we need to expand this area. And we did that every week for, 12 or 13 weeks, until finally we read the whole thing from beginning to end out loud, it didn't have any more notes. And then we said, okay, it's finished now. And that's a process that we did with our last book, Get Strong, as well. And it really helps you just figure out what the most essential things are that you want to say.
I like that tip. I'm going to use that one for myself in my next book that I'm writing for sure.
You should try it. And it's good also because there's two of us. So if one of us has an edit, sometimes the other one's like, but I wrote that sentence and I'm attached to that sentence. But we always say, you know what, if you say cut it, I'm going to let go of that and cut it. So sometimes you get very attached to your own writing, and having someone who didn't actually create those words themselves can see it more objectively.
I love it. I love it. So the whole book is really just a polished gem, is the way I can put it. Like, if
Thank you so
it's all
much.
refined, it's polished down, it's super simple. Now let's get into the actual tools and the exercises here. A lot of what you've done in the past in your books and your approaches and stuff have been very minimalist bodyweight training approaches. So going into the more equipment-based things with the rings and the parallettes, is this something that you've always done a lot of, or is it somewhat new to you? What's your history with these tools?
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because Danny and I talked about this too. For us, using rings and parallettes is pretty high tech, because we're used to just a pull-up bar and a floor. But like you said, in the grand scheme of fitness equipment, it's still very stripped down, very minimalist. And my own experience, I first encountered parallettes probably about 10 years ago. And I made a pair myself at a PVC pipe, and I still have them.
Yep.
And it was, in the beginning, it was just for training handstands and training else. And then after a little while, you start exploring them and discovering other exercises and other variations and other things you can try. And I think I first encountered the rings not very long after that. And the rings, I think everyone in the beginning, when you try rings, you have that moment of, whoa, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. Because, you know, I fancied myself pretty good at pull-ups, pretty good at dips, pretty good at muscle-ups. And the first time I got on the rings, just holding myself up in the top position of that dip, that support position, I couldn't believe how much I was shaking and how difficult that was the first time I tried it. And I could already do muscle-ups on a bar at this point. So it was a really good thing for me. And, you know, it was one of those things where I didn't immediately jump in and say, I got to train with this right away. It was kind of like, whoa, that was tricky and challenging, and it kind of went to the back burner. And then kind of little by little over time, I would be in scenarios where I'd be around rings and would creep back in, and I'd mess with them a little bit more and a little bit more. And then really about a year ago, I started training with the rings a lot more, because I was at a gym where I was training some clients, and they got a new set of rings, and they were there. And sometimes just access, you know, makes you start messing with something more. And it was also around the same time that the idea for this book came together, because like you said, I was starting to use these more in my programs. And this is often something that has happened in my career. I was looking for information myself, and I was feeling what you said at the beginning of this interview. You know, I'm not finding something that is really a good consolidated explanation of this tip, of this equipment and how to use it. So I did a lot of, you know, on the back end, my own research, reading about other things, talking to other people who had more experience, trial and error, just doing different exercises and experimenting. And was able to, over time, with Danny and with his experience as well, like we said, whittled it down and refined this and polished it, and finally came up with something that you saw that we feel really proud of.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that whole humbling aspect of the rings. I like how these tools, it's funny because you ask some people and they'll say that tools are, you know, they're extra, they're extraneous, they're not something you need and stuff. But I always found that in the bodyweight world, rings and parallettes and stuff, they don't just allow you to get more versatility and some adjustments in your exercises, but they're key at helping you discover these weak links that may be holding back exercises you're not using on these things. And is that something you've used a lot as a coach yourself? Is it more of almost an assessment tool, or do you use a lot of other things?
Yeah, it can definitely be an assessment tool. And a lot of times I like to give my clients variety as well. And that was part of what it was for me too. You know, I've been doing so much stuff just with a basic pull-up bar for so long that I wanted to mix it up a little bit. And it certainly is something that with my clients, I like to test them. And okay, this guy's pretty strong doing parallel bar dips. Let me throw him on the rings and see how he handles that. And sometimes people surprise you, and other times people struggle, and that's what I've come to expect most of the time when I put someone on there in the beginning. So they're surprised if they're struggling, but I'm surprised if they're not struggling in the beginning.
Now, for me, I've always kind of liked that because I've got this mentality of I want to find ways to make basic exercises harder and more challenging. I don't want to chase after the numbers like rep chasing I talk about. And just back in the day when I lifted weight, it was all about how much can I put on the bar, because inevitably for me, it's always, if you chase the numbers, you find ways to make the exercises easier. But things like rings and stuff, they make it possible to make it harder, which I think has more value in the long-term results.
It's the quality over quantity approach. Yeah, I'm not concerned with as many reps as possible. I'm concerned with as many good reps as possible.
Yeah, and when you start really getting dialed into some of the technical aspects of this stuff, like where are your elbows and how much contact are you using with, are you pressing into the rings versus more stable and free form? Things can change really quickly when you start getting into the details like that, which you cover a lot in the book, which is super appreciated because there's so much you can adjust and modify. Now, when it comes to some of these tools, I think some folks may look at it also on the other side and say, this is too advanced for me. This is beyond what I can do. If someone came to you and said, no, I can't do any of this stuff, what would you say to that?
I mean, for a total beginner, rings, I could see why that would be intimidating. And sometimes it is better to just start off. I like to meet people halfway. So if someone comes in and they say to me, I don't know what the heck to do, just show me some stuff. And I bust out the rings and they look at me like, whoa, I'm not ready for that. I'll say, okay, maybe we'll try those next time. Let's do a push-up. Let's do something more basic. But other times you get the opposite. People want to do something different. And that's why they're coming to me as a trainer, or why they're seeking out a book. They've stalled with wherever they're at. So this book, certainly, someone could pick this up if they've never worked out before and jump right into the beginning if they are, in decent shape. But for other people, this book is going to be something that's going to break them out of a plateau. And we hear from people all the time who say, I'm stuck with my training. And sometimes just changing it up a little bit is the key to progressing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely can agree with that one. Some new toys to play with can make anything that you've done a million times feel really new and refreshing.
And it also could just provide more motivation, because, a big part of what people need is the accountability. And when you have something fun and something novel, it sometimes makes it fresh and more exciting for you, and you're more encouraged to want to continue to do it.
Yeah, I guess that is one of the biggest challenges in training in general, but especially with bodyweight training, is how do you give that novel stimulus and something a little bit different? Because it's so easy to get into that rut where you're just kind of counting out the reps and going through the same thing all the time. Having something new to think about in your workouts makes it feel much more fresh, and these tools definitely help you. So with these tools, what are some of your go-to exercises for the rings and both for the parallettes?
Well, like I said, if I'm working with somebody on the rings, the very first thing I'll usually have them try is just holding themselves above the rings in that support hold, because that's a good way for me to assess if they're a complete novice or if they're ready to try some more beginner intermediate things. So if somebody's able to do that without too much trouble, I can say, okay, this person has a pretty good core strength, pretty good body control. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes someone right away, I know they're not going to be able to do it. So I never want to put someone in a situation where I'm trying to have them do something that I don't think they can do. Because then if they can't do it, then they're going to be morally, disappointed by it. So I want to give people things they can do, ideally. Mm-hmm. But that said, just hanging from the rings. If I don't think someone's ready to try that support press, just hanging. Do they have the grip strength? Do they have the shoulder stability? Mm-hmm. And if the hang goes well, maybe we'll try a flexed arm hang, holding the top position of a pull-up. And then from there, The program is detailed in a way that I don't want to give too much away about it, but it does have some, I'd like to think, good progressions that a beginner could jump in with.
Yeah, that it does for sure. That's one of the things I've always liked about these is it gives the ability to adjust many different variables of basic exercises. Like how many times have we heard, I can't do push-ups, I can't do pull-ups and stuff, and then we'll take simple tools like this and simple regressions and be like, well, now you can. We'll find the variation that you can do. And that's so empowering to some people who thought their whole life, like, I can't do this. And then they think, well, no, you can. It's just this variation to it. And I think that's one of the best things about these tools is it opens the world of bodyweight training to a much broader range of capability.
Yeah, the Parralletes are great like that because you are able to keep your wrist in a neutral position. And for people who have problems with wrist flexion and bearing weight on their hands while their wrists are in flexion, the Parralletes eliminates that and hopefully strengthens the wrist through the various exercises that you perform while you're gripping.
Yeah. In my own experience, working with others and for myself too, I've been noticing there's a lot of benefit to that neutral grip with so many exercises, pushing, pulling, even some core and leg training, and the tools that allow you to have a neutral grip, like the rings, like the Parralletes. When you're using these and it's like, oh, now my shoulders are neutral, my elbows are neutral, everything else can find that comfortable middle ground. So it's not just about giving you more accessibility to different exercises to make something easier. It's also about just helping you find your groove and making exercises feel good again.
Absolutely. I mean, a big thing with me is I want people to enjoy what they're doing. So if somebody is frustrated because an exercise isn't going as they plan to, and this program allows them to do it in a way that feels better for them, then they're going to stick with it more, they're going to enjoy the process more, they're going to get better results out of it.
Yeah, as I've been coming to tell people, it's like effective exercise feels good. If your exercises aren't feeling good, like if they're feeling like a struggle, well, one, we've bought so much into that no pain, no gain kind of mentality that when physically or mentally or even emotionally, if we're uncomfortable about an exercise, we get glued to that and we sometimes think, oh, that must mean it's great. But actually, I think the opposite is the case.
The pain thing is always a tricky word. I always have to point out to people when I train them not to confuse pain and discomfort. Because you might experience some discomfort while you're training. But, when you train for long enough, you start to associate that discomfort not with being a negative thing, but with, oh, this is what's really affecting change now. And you want to get to that place where your muscles are burning and where you're shaking, because that's where the magic happens. And when you've been in that zone enough times, and then you've afterwards gone back and felt, oh, I'm stronger now because I pushed myself to that limit, then you no longer see it as something to fear, but something to embrace.
So I guess coming back to that whole idea I was mentioning earlier of I love these things because they make it easier to work the muscles harder. And so that point where we're embracing that discomfort, it's kind of like a good discomfort, but it makes it easier and more comfortable to be in that situation versus without these tools, if we're trying something that's beyond our reach or beyond our ability, and there's that little voice in the back of our mind saying, this really isn't okay, this isn't safe, but these tools give you more access to that level of comfortable discomfort, if you could say. I guess that's the way I put it.
Yeah, that potential is definitely there. But, to be perfectly clear, the rings and the Parralletes are great tools, and I'm super proud of this book. But you can get strong doing calisthenics without doing rings and Parralletes. It's not the only way to build strength. It's a great way to build strength. It's a great tool. It's a great supplement to other forms of strength training. But there are people who don't use rings and Parralletes who are pretty advanced with bodyweight training, or who don't exclusively use them. So I don't want people to get the idea that I'm saying, oh no, this is the only thing out there that's really going to give you what you want. It's one thing out there, but my other books and programs, this is not to say like, oh, all of those are forget about that and just do this one.
Sure.
You know, my previous book, Get Strong, which is not a ring and parallettes book, it's still a great program, and I still stand by that one as well.
Yeah. It's always good to have options. I guess that's the bottom line about this is these tools give you options. This book gives you options. The approach gives you options. When you have options, you can customize things to be a perfect fit for what you need rather than trying to force something that isn't a good fit for your body or for your goals or any other constraints that you have. So this opens up more versatility and flexibility for better results.
Well said. I agree completely.
Perfect. Well, it's been great chatting with you. The book is fantastic. I can't say enough about it. When is it coming out? What is the release date?
So we're just waiting on the books to finish printing and binding, and then once they're in the warehouse, we're hopefully going to get it on sale June 10th. If we're a little delayed, it might be a little after that, but right now that's our target date for the release.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. And everybody, if you want to get in touch with Al, what's the best places to find you, Al?
You know, I've got a name that's very Googleable if you spell it right. So the last name is Kavadlo. And if you just Google those 7 letters, you're going to find a lot of stuff about me and my brother Danny. And hopefully some of it will inspire you.
It is inspiring. It's very inspiring to watch you two work, and everything out there is fantastic. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, your website. Anywhere else I'm missing?
I think you hit all the major ones.
Very
Thank
good.
you so much for that.
Yeah. And I'll have links if you're listening to this on the podcast audio. I'll have links on the RDP post page about this. If you're watching this on YouTube, links are down below in the description. Al, send us off with your final words of wisdom here. What do you think?
Last words of wisdom. Go get the book, Next Level Strength.
Awesome. Very good. Al, thank you so much for taking your time to be with us here and explaining and describing your new book. Everybody check out the book if this is past June 10th, Next Level Strength. Highly recommend it. And Al, thank you very much.
Hey. We're working out. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me, Matt.
Excellent. I'll talk to you folks later. Let me know if you have any questions. Talk to you next week, folks. Till then, be fit, live free.